In this video, I'm going to be walking you through what Vapi Squads are, why you should probably be using them, and why I'm personally using them for a lot of my inbound receptionist builds. Now, of course, we're talking about Vapi Squads here, so if you're using a different sort of orchestration layer like retail or something else, they may have an equivalent available, most of them do, but in this specific case we're talking about Vapi. So what are squads? Well, simply put, squads are basically a network of different assistants that kind of connect together. So instead of having one massive assistant with one massive prompt, we can actually split it up into different roles, and it can basically transfer between assistants without the user really knowing what's going on. So to the user, it will sound like one consistent call, but in the back end, we're actually transferring to multiple different assistants. So for example, for an inbound receptionist voice agent build, a lot of the times we need to qualify the new leads. Once they're qualified, we need to book them in. We might be getting calls for people wanting to reschedule assisting appointments and so on. And so trying to fit all of this functionality into one giant assistant and one giant prompt is a nightmare. You end up with these massive prompts. I've personally spent days and days, even weeks sometimes, trying to fit one inbound receptionist build into one massive prompt, and it just doesn't work. Once it gets to a certain size, it just gets absolutely bloated and things start going wrong and it gets super messy and you don't know what's happening. And so I found that splitting it up into multiple different specialist roles just makes the whole thing so much easier. And that's because one assistant can have one narrow specific role, and then once it's ready to pass on to the next one, we just add in a few specific rules of when it needs to hand over and which assistant it should hand over to, and then it can transfer to a completely different assistant with a completely different specialized role. And this tends to work really well in production. And so typically what we'll end up building is a router assistant, which is first, which is basically going to determine which assistant to hand off to straight off the bat based on what the user is talking to us about. So for example, for a new lead, the router would detect that that's a new lead, and then it's going to transfer over to the qualifier. Then the qualifier would ask all of the qualification questions, qualify the lead, and if they're qualified, then it's going to transfer over to the booking assistant where we can actually get them booked in. Now, the good thing about this is that between calls, information doesn't actually get lost. So we can set it up in a way where each handover, we're actually passing on the information that we've gathered in the previous assistant so that the new assistant has all of that context, and so it's not exactly starting from scratch. So the main advantages here being this is a much more reliable approach, especially when it comes to agents that are serving multiple different roles, like a receptionist sort of role. It makes debugging so much easier because when you have a massive prompt and you've got loads of different things stuffed into it, you know, how to book, how to qualify, all of this, when things go wrong, it's so hard to figure out what's actually going on. And so when we have it split up into these nice little chunks, it makes debugging with the LLM prompt so much easier. And as well, each assistant will have its own set of tools, and so that just simplifies the tool calling process to link to our backend, which is NA10, but it could be, you know, make.com or whatever you're using. So let's stop talking about it and let me actually show you what a realistic setup would actually look like within squads, within Vapi. Okay, so we're at the Vapi dashboard here, okay, and you'll see that squads is the second one down in the dashboard here. So you're going to click on this, and then you can create a new squad. Now, I'm actually going to show you a bit of a template that I've already kind of pre-built so you can get an idea. Otherwise, we'd be sat here for hours building it from scratch. Okay, so I'm going to click into this. Now, this is what the dashboard looks like, okay? So you can see here, just straight off the bat, we've got 4 different assistants working together, and you can see that these lines are where they're kind of connecting. So you can see, let's start from the beginning. So we've got a routing assistant, okay? And by the way, you need to set these assistants up first, so you need to create the assistant, and then once you've created all of them, then you can link them up in squads and adjust some of the settings and the variables, which I'll show you how to do. So we've got the starting node, which is the router, okay, and if we click in this, we can see that we've got the prompt, okay, which again we would have done on the assistant side. Basically just explaining how we need to route the users depending on what they're saying. And of course you can set up different settings here, but I prefer to do that on the assistant end rather than the squad side of things, if that makes sense. Now you'll see in tools that we've got a few different things here. So we've got tools that are native to the assistant that we've set up, okay, as custom functions, but then we've also got all of these different handoff tools. And the reason we do this, obviously with the router, is it needs to have access to all of the tools so that it's able to hand off to the correct assistant. Now, you can either set this up within squads itself, Or you can come over to tools and you'd create a new tool, and you can actually create a specific handoff tool where you can configure the tool exactly how you want it. So coming back to the squad's dashboard, okay, you can see that we've got 3 different connections here. So we've got a qualifying assistant, we've got a booking assistant, and I've actually included a spam handling assistant as well. So let's go through each scenario. So let's say someone calls in and they're interested in a new job. Then in that case, we want to qualify them first, and so it would hand off to the qualifying assistant where it's going to go ahead and qualify them. Then once it's qualified, it would then hand off to the booking assistant where we can go ahead and book them in, and then the call would normally kind of end there. Now, the reason I've got this linked straight to the booking assistant as well is if someone's calling about an existing booking and they're wanting to reschedule it, then it will go straight to the booking assistant where we've got the rescheduling functionality built into that as well. And then of course we have the spam handler. So if people are calling up, trying to sell services, or it's a robocaller, or it's just, spam, then it's going to detect that and transfer to the spam handling assistant where it can be handled appropriately. Now, the reason I have all of these links between assistants is kind of as an error fallback. So let's say someone calls wanting to reschedule an existing appointment, but the router accidentally thinks it's a new lead and hands off to the qualifier. Well, what we'd actually do is within the qualifying prompt, we have an error fallback where it basically says if someone's come into this flow, but then they actually start saying they need to reschedule an existing appointment, it can detect that and think, okay, this is an error, let me actually hand off to the booking and rescheduling assistant. And then obviously the same principle applies in kind of all of these directions. So let's say that the router accidentally thinks that they're wanting to reschedule an existing appointment, but actually they're a completely new lead that needs to be qualified first and they don't have an appointment. Then again, we would have within the booking assistant prompt a fallback where it can detect that actually, this is a new lead, not an existing appointment. So let's transfer back to the qualifier and restart the flow. I hope that all makes sense. Now, there's a few things I just want to cover quickly, okay? So you'll see at the top, you've got squad overrides here. So what these are basically rules that you can set within the squad that's going to apply to all of the assistants, no matter what the actual settings are within the individual assistants. So, for example, you could set the model to be GPT 4.1, and that's now going to apply to all of the assistants in the squad, even if the individual assistant has a different model selected. So this is kind of just a simple override feature. So if you want everything to be kind of standardized, like for example the voice, so it sounds all of the same, or you want the same model, or the same temperature, or just different settings, then you can set them in the overrides and then it will just apply to all of the squads exactly the same. The other thing here you'll see is variables, okay? So basically if you're sending off tool parameters, then whatever variables you're setting within those parameters, it will show up in the squad here, okay? Now, obviously, there's quite a few here, 73 in this case, okay? That's just mainly because of the qualifying assistant, but you can basically see all of them here just for simplicity. Now, another thing I want to go into a bit more depth in is the handoff tools, okay? So if I click into this one, you'll see that in the tools, I've actually set these as a base handoff, or I've set this one off as a base handoff. So that's basically meaning that I've gone into tools and I've created a handoff tool. But you can actually add them directly into the squad just on this dashboard. So you can come over to this add button and you can see I've just added a handoff tool. So if we click into this, then we can basically configure this. And then within the prompt of the assistant, we just need to instruct it when to call that specific tool and then how to call it, and then also what information to pass over. Now, I prefer to do this in the tool section here, and I'll show you why. Because within the tool section, we can actually adjust a lot more settings, okay? So you can add in the custom parameters, of course. You can set the destination, so which assistant is going to hand off to. And then we can actually set up a context engineering plan. So all this means is basically when it's handing over to another assistant, we want to basically configure, okay, the first assistant had a bit of a chat with the customer. How much of that information and that history do we want to pass over to the next assistant? So obviously we don't want nothing, because a lot of the times the context from the first assistant is kind of important and the second assistant needs to have that context. But at the same time, we don't want to overload it with useless context that's just going to bloat the prompt. So we can set it to either all messages, no messages, which I would usually kind of not recommend, or last end messages, where we can actually decide how many of the last messages do we want to pass over to the next assistant. Okay, so you can actually set that as a custom value here. And so the main reason we would set parameters is to set variables. Okay, so let's say that the user has already told us their name. We want to set that as a variable so that when we hand off to the next assistant, it already knows that variable, and so it's able to know their name without having to re-ask it, if that makes sense. So we've just gone through a quick rundown of the dashboard, okay? In reality, this does take a bit of a while to set up because you have to set up each individual assistant first, and then you need to add in each assistant to the squad, and then you need to add in all of the handoff tools and the rules and the prompts and so on. So it does take a bit of time to get this set up. But I want to just show you how it works and how actually seamless the transfers can be.
Thank you for calling Apex Roofing. This is James. How can I help you today?
Hi, I'm looking to get my roof fully replaced. Is that something you could help with?
Sure, we can help with a full roof replacement. I'll just grab a couple quick details to get you booked in. What's the full address of the property, including city and state?
So I'm going to try a different scenario where I come in speaking like I'm a new lead, and then once it's handed off, I'm going to say, oh, actually, it's an existing appointment. Can I get it rescheduled? So let's see what happens.
Thank you for calling Apex Roofing. This is James. How can I help you today?
Hi, I'm looking to get my roof replaced. Is that something you can help with?
Sure, we can help with a full roof replacement. I'll just grab a couple quick details to get you booked in. What's the full address of the property, including city and state?
I'm actually looking to get my existing appointment rescheduled.
Okay. Is this to reschedule your existing appointment?
Yes.
I can see you're currently booked for your free home visit. Is that the appointment you want to move?
Okay, so you can see that it initially handed off to the qualifying assistants, and then I kind of switched up on them a little bit there, but then it kind of detected that and then transferred over to the booking assistant where we can get our appointment rescheduled. So again, you can see that the handovers, when they're done right, can be really quick, but you need to get the prompting right and the handover of information kind of smooth, so that process is kind of seamless. But you can see that from the caller's perspective, even though there's like 3 different assistants we've just spoken to there, it's all pretty standardized and it all kind of sounds the same with all the same settings. So it would be pretty hard for them to notice that it's actually different assistants that they're speaking to. So as one last test, let's just try the spam handling assistant and see what that handoff looks like.
Thank you for calling Apex Roofing. This is James. How can I help you today?
Hi, I'm looking to speak to someone about selling SEO.
Got it. Thanks for calling. We're not taking marketing or sales calls. Please remove us from your list. Goodbye.
Okay, so you can see the spam handler was a bit savage there, and obviously you could adjust that to kind of deal with that however you want. But you can see that it's detecting each of those situations and then transferring appropriately, and the whole thing is kind of run smoothly once it's set up correctly. So I wanted to avoid getting into the nitty-gritty of building these because we'd be sat here for hours, but I hope this gives you a bit of an overview as to what squads are within Vapi, how you would use them, and why I'm personally using these for most of my builds at this point. So if you want more kind of detailed videos about how to set these up from scratch, then please let me know. That's something I could consider, but that would be very time consuming. It would be quite a long video, but if that's something you really want to see, then please let me know in the comments below. If not, I will see you in the next one.